Hi, welcome tonight. We're with Trail Run Coach, and I am Coach Loretta, and I am super excited about tonight because we're going to be talking about rim to rim to rim on the at the Grand Canyon. And everybody on the screen here, but me, has experienced it. So we get to learn from their experiences, some great tips and advice from the experts. So thanks for joining us tonight. And something unique about our show tonight is it might run a little bit long. So bear with us. We will, if it does go over 30 minutes, we will separate this into 2 shows because we just have so much information that we want to get out there. I get responses from people all the time about really wanting to put rim to rim to rim on their bucket list. They really want to do it. So we wanted to help support you, to give you a great journey and to make sure that you're safe along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone that's with me tonight. Lindsay, would you like to start off?
Hi guys, my name is Lindsay Phoenix, and I've of course done rim to rim to rim. I did it back in 2019 maybe. Yeah, 2019. It was before the world had its chaos. But I'm based out of Los Angeles, so it's just a short 7-hour drive to the Grand Canyon, but had the best time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on tonight, Lindsay.
Yeah, of course.
Hey everybody, I'm Coach Scott Struck. From here in Battle Creek, Michigan. I have done rim to rim twice, once in 19 and once again in 21. And it is just a phenomenal journey. It's one of the hardest things that I've ever done, but it's also one of the most memorable, just transformative, just amazing things. And so if you have the opportunity to do it and you can train for it and you can prepare, then absolutely you should try to go do this and cross this off your bucket list. It's a fantastic journey.
Nice. Thanks, Scott.
Hi, my name is Reese. I just got back from a Grand Canyon crossing, double crossing. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe I'm more tan than usual. Usually we get pretty white here in Wisconsin. But yeah, just like Scott was saying, transformative experience, definitely one that needs to be checked off of anyone's list. That even thinks that they may potentially in the future have a possibility of doing it, do it for sure. Put it on the calendar and budget some time and some energy for it. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us tonight, Reese. And also, Reese has taken some time to write a personal blog about his journey, and that will be published this week in our FKT. So you can look forward to that too. It will be on our website as well.
Great, and I'll bring up the rear here. Tim Ryan coming to you live from Naperville, Illinois. I did rim to rim to rim last year in the springtime around April. I think Scott, you framed it up great, man, which is life-changing experience. Something I think we all desire to do again. We're all jealous of Reese for having that opportunity to do it recently, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I have the pleasure and honor of being coached by Loretta. So I appreciate everything she does, and I couldn't have done the trip without her. And I think my role tonight is to represent all of the amateurs that are out there, because I think everybody else is a coach or an expert for sure on this call. But happy to answer any of the amateur questions as they come along here.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim, for joining us tonight. I'm super excited to hear about all of your stories. We've made Coach Reese be quiet, so you guys get to hear it firsthand from him, even before we get to hear his journey. So we're going to kind of go around and focus on different topics, and anybody can kind of join in and share some information. We do have certain people that it kind of felt a little bit of passion towards certain subjects, and so they will kind of take the lead on those. So we are going to start us out with, this was going to kind of really focus on the prep and the planning of your trip to rim to rim to rim. If while you're out there watching, you have any questions, feel free to submit those. We'll either answer them during our show or after our show, we'll get those answered for you. So the first piece, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Scott, and we're going to talk about planning the route and the logistics.
Okay, great. Yes, so there are several different ways to do this. The traditional route is sort of like an upside down Y-shaped trail. You typically go from South Kaibab down to Phantom Ranch, cross the river to Phantom Ranch, then go across the floor of the canyon along Bright Angel Creek, and then up to the North Rim through Supai Tunnel, turn around, come back down the way you came to Phantom Ranch, but then most people go up and out the Bright Angel Trail. And so what that means is your car is not where you are ending up. And so if that is the route you want to do, you've got to make plans to somehow get from the trailhead you started at to the trailhead you finish at. So that is a few miles. And so if you come back in the middle of the night, that's going to be problematic. You're going to need a ride somehow, or somebody's going to have to run an extra 3 or 4 miles to get the car. So keep that in mind. It is completely possible to go South Kaibab, down to Phantom, up North Kaibab, and then back to South and end up where you start. But you do miss sort of part of the experience of coming up, through Bright Angel Trail all the way to the rim, the South Rim again. But those routes are well known, well traveled. There are a lot of people on those. There are a couple of alternates to that route. You can go from the South Rim down to Phantom Ranch, spend some time, enjoy some lemonade, hang out, turn around and come back. That's a lot shorter and a lot more doable, but there's a lot of climbing there still. Or another alternative is you can go down South Kaibab down to Phantom Ranch, hike across the floor of the canyon for a bit to go to a little spur trail that leads to Ribbon Falls, which is an iconic spot out there, which is really nice. This big waterfall coming down with this big pool of turquoise greenish water and everything. It's just a beautiful photographic spot. And then you can go back to the ranch and then hike up and out of the canyon. So those are shorter routes that you can do if you want to experience almost everything, but not the tremendous climb up the North Rim and back. Either way, there's a great Facebook group out there, and that has lots of good information, and it will give people lots of current knowledge about what's happening, what the conditions are, what the trail's like, what's happening, and so on. Grand Canyon Rim to Rim is the Facebook group. Something else that I wanted to mention are the mules. There are mule trains that leave to go down to supply Phantom Ranch with food and water and gear and so on, and to bring visitors down. So you need to get ahead of the mule trains because you cannot pass them very easily because the trail is narrow and the handlers will not let you pass and risk yourself or the mules. So you end up stuck behind them. For that reason, it's really important to start before 4 a.m. from the South Rim and to get down there ahead of them. And also you want to be ahead of the mules because if you're behind them, what do mules do? They poop. So you're dodging piles of mule poop on the way down. And if it's dark and you're not watching exactly where you're going, that could be a real bad thing. So get ahead of the mules.
And don't let Scott fool you, because even if you do get ahead of the mules, you are still going to be dodging a lot of poop. So make sure you have your headlamp batteries charged.
Yes, sure. And there's very few vault toilets out there. So plan accordingly, bring a pack of baby wipes and a shovel. What else have I done?
Yeah.
Anything else planning wise, logistic wise?
Anybody have anything to add to that, the planning logistics?
Maybe be sure that people have accommodations for after. A lot of times it takes people a lot longer than what they were anticipating. So a hotel room is a great idea. You're most likely going to finish in the dark. So you're going to want, and it's cold no matter what time of year you go. When you finish, it's cold. So just be sure to have some sort of accommodations to where you can, and some hotels aren't there, at midnight or later. So be sure to have something already set up before you need it.
Okay, awesome. And I know Coach Scott mentioned there's some delicious lemonade. Coach Reese, did you get any of that lemonade?
No, we didn't. So by the time we had come back through Phantom Ranch, my buddy was like, "Oh man, I really want some." And then we got all the way through, and somebody told him that it was at the cabin, probably about like a half mile behind us. He goes, "I'm not turning around. I'm not turning around."
Tim, did you have the lemonade while you were there?
I didn't. I think by the time I got to Phantom Ranch the second time, I had one mission, and that was the sour cream and cheddar ruffle chips that were back in my hotel. So, that's where I was going.
All right. So the next topic is gear. Coach Reese, do you want to start us off on gear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that something like this type of endeavor takes Special consideration on exactly what you bring, because you can't, bring the whole van with you, but yet you want to be covered. You definitely want to make sure that you have shoes that are going to fit you well, preferably shoes that you haven't or that you have had time to get adjusted to, and know that, okay, given if my feet do swell a little bit during the day, I'm not going to be compressing my toes on a bunch of different sides. Now, gaiters are something that would probably be a good idea. I didn't personally find it too necessary, but Bright Angel and North Kaibab, as far as I know, are very dusty. Even at 3 o'clock in the morning, when me and my buddy started, you could see in the headlamps, every footstep, there were little plumes of dust. So if you're somebody who gets aggravated by dust in your shoes, for sure, gaiters can be a really great idea. Headlamp battery that you're well comfortable with, for sure. I know we talked about a long time ago, when you're looking in the Grand Canyon, it's so interesting because you're going down one rim. So if you turn your head one way, you're going to see just a wall. And then you look up and it's just a wall as far as the eye can see. And then you turn your head the other way and it's blackness, especially at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. So make sure that you're comfortable with your headlamp, because just given the conditions, it already kind of throws you off a little bit, just looking over and seeing nothing, especially for a couple thousand feet going down the side of the trail. So you definitely don't want to be dizzy or kind of get caught in that headlamp bubble that can drive some people mad. But other than that, poles are going to be a great idea as well, especially for the hike up. There's a lot of really big size steps that are more like 2 to 3 steps in size or so. So if you're experienced with poles, or if you've been training with them, definitely on a day where you're going to be doing 12,000 foot elevation gain, that'd probably be a good idea to bust them out for sure. My friend that I went with used them. I personally didn't. But then again, I'm not used to poles. So I was like, oh, I don't want to take that chance and really noodle out my arms or, trip or whatever. So he used those. And we did see some people wearing some pretty slim down vests, because just like Scott said, it is a very well marked and well traveled trail. So for most people, I would say, you know what, if this is your first time doing it, which is it's most people's first and only time doing it, definitely go bigger. Don't go so streamlined. You definitely want to make sure that you comfortably have all of your essentials. And I know we're going to talk safety gear later on down the road too. But you want to be able to carry your safety gear, your nutrition, as well as some coats. Personally, we brought some coats just because when we started, it was 27 degrees. So it warmed up pretty quickly to a nice like 55 or so before it turned about like 80, 90 in the heat of the day. So you definitely want to be prepared and have storage capacity for definitely a breath of an adventure, for sure, because you're going to be going through a lot of different environments.
Right. Thank you. Lindsay, what do you have to add?
Yeah.
So for gear, this can probably be, I know we're going to touch on the filtration system for the river, but I'll go ahead and mention it now because it is a piece of gear and I have it with me. So this is a version of the Life Straw. So it's a filtration system. You can use it with the bag here that you can fill, or you can just keep this filter with you, and essentially you attach it to any spigot that fits and you can filter out your water. So you can essentially just drink through this end of it and it filters out all sorts of bacteria, and it's generally safe to use that. So there's all different sorts of filter systems. You can have the iodine pills, you can have things like this, you can have ones that are bigger or smaller, but I think it's a great idea to have at least one of those in case you do need to refill from the river.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's so small and it's so lightweight too.
Yeah,
but it's such a necessity.
And you can even just roll this one up like that, like, so it's super tiny.
That's exactly what I carried, and it was a great, we ended up not using them because the water was all turned on. So I would say we never went longer than about 7 miles. without being near like some sort of potable water.
Yeah.
But there's not only water at the Colorado River, but there's so many rivers and little streams that you're going to pass over that, you know, like say, if you're planning a longer adventure, or 7 to 8 miles at the longest is going to be, you know, a lengthy time, or you don't plan on carrying any more than like a liter or so. Definitely that would be a huge benefit.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Anything that we missed on gear?
Go ahead.
I was going to make a comment on the pack. I think for me that was interesting because I have a lot of packs, but I'm not training where I'm carrying a whole lot of things with me. So a lot of my packs are super slim and super light. And then this is a big difference. But, you know, I have heard of people complaining about the fact that they didn't train with the pack that they actually ran with because it was much bigger than what they're normally training with. And so, you know, I would probably buy the pack and then run with it for a while. So that's probably one thing. And then the other thing is I ran with a buff as well, but I ran during COVID time. So the buff worked like in 20 different ways, whether that was a washcloth, whether that was protection from the dust, or, you know, just to wipe the sweat away. But I used that a ton of ways, and I think that was super helpful for me to take with.
Yeah, I mentioned that I did it in 2019, and now that you say that, I had the buff because of the dust that was really bad at the North Rim. So we had, you know, kind of a foreshadowing to 2020. We were all running with our buffs like above our nose because of the dust that is able to kick up on the other side. And then also sunscreen at least have someone in your group with sunscreen because it is exposed out there. So have someone with extra sunscreen.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great tips. One of the things I see on the list that we didn't talk about is space blanket, or if we did, I missed it. Did anybody want to chime in on that?
I had put that on the list. I mean, to kind of, you know, amplify what Reese had said about jackets and gear and stuff. You know, the temperature varies so much that you just never know what you're gonna encounter. And a space blanket weighs nothing. And if you're in a really bad situation, you know, you can, you know, really trap a lot of heat with one of those things. So, you know, if you have one from a race and you can fold it up real small and stick it in your pack, that's probably not a bad idea. And also zippers, things with zippers, layers, you know, all that stuff, you know, all the stuff that runners have, it really makes sense to really choose your gear wisely. So I also wanted to mention, you know, Reese was talking about lights, and you're going to encounter a lot of darkness out there. So making sure you're really comfortable with your light makes perfect sense, Reese. Having backup batteries, and also being aware that you're going to hike out in the darkness also. So you're going to have a light source and battery for the way out to get out, you know, safely. So
What do you think is better, a headlamp or a waist lamp in this situation, or both?
I am like somebody that always has about 8 lights attached to her because I can't see at all. But I have these great, I should have actually brought one out here. I've got these great Amazon little squares, and their battery lasts at least 5 hours, and they come in a 2-pack, and I bring 4 of them, and you can clip them anywhere on you. They don't bounce, but that way you're not fighting with the headlamp. I can't wear one on my head. So I'll usually bring a headlamp, and then I'll bring all 4 of those little squares, and you can just put them in your pocket, but they're LED, and they last forever out there on the trail. So those are super helpful, and they're on Amazon.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the lights?
I always run with a headlamp.
Okay.
And a small backup headlamp with plenty of batteries. I like the rechargeable battery packs, the Petzl.
Okay.
You know, Actic Core lights. So that's just me. I mean, other people do like the body mounted lights. You know, the Kogawas are pretty bright. Right. Yeah.
Right.
One thing about I'm just super sensitive with stuff on my head that gives me a headache, but I noticed I already had a headache due to the altitude in Arizona. So a headlamp on it would have just done me in. So, but some people love a headlamp, but it's probably good to have a few options if you're a little bit like me.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned altitude. What do you guys think about that? Is there something that people should consider when just approaching it?
Extra hydration. It's not enough to notice it, I think, when you're walking around or anything, but it's just the hydration factor of it all.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree. Hydrate like crazy the day or two before. Yep. Going well hydrated.
Yeah, if you're not used to altitude, hydration as well as carbohydrates, like the body definitely goes through more energy the higher up at elevation you are. So, definitely all training recommendations apply as far as, how much you're going to be eating the day of, how much you plan to eat, maybe bump that by like 50 calories an hour at least or so. Once you figure out something that works for you at sea level or at Wisconsin level here, I know we're at like 1,200 feet. So, so that might be something that would be worthwhile, is just playing around with at least a few extra calories during training.
Okay, good tip. Tim, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to say, definitely getting there a day early helps, right? Especially if you're coming from a place like Wisconsin or Illinois, like I was. But everyone's talking about hydrating for elevation, but it's also super hot. So like you get a double whammy of being at elevation and having the sun beating down on you all day. So, definitely hydrating and eating and, getting there a little bit early is helpful. But, I definitely felt it more on the North Rim than I think anything else. Could have been that I just ran 25 miles and had to turn around and run another 25. But I think there is that. Yes.
So Coach Reese, I'm going to turn this one to you. When we're talking about hydrating, what about the electrolyte piece?
Oh gosh, is that huge? Yeah, absolutely. I was telling my buddy the entire time, I was like, we got to make sure that our salt is, like on point. And personally, I have little cues just with what happens to my body. My fingertips will get like kind of puffy, and same with my toes and stuff like that. And sometimes I'll notice like a little bit of like my stomach just isn't processing water at all. So that's absolutely something that I'd like to say you can train for in Wisconsin, but it's especially this time of year, it's really tough just because we're not really experiencing the heat and the weather that would demand an increase in sodium, right? Like we can kind of like train our bodies to handle more miles, handle more vert, at least keep our hydration and our fueling, our calories up before running. But to a certain degree, if we're not sweating that much because it's April in Wisconsin or April in the Midwest, like it's really hard to practice more sodium. But I think that's just where the accumulation of experience at longer events can kind of tell us, or we can kind of cue in or clue into our bodies with what needs to be happening, so definitely making sure that you're well prepared with foods that are salty, like chips, or drink mixes that have electrolytes, as well as I personally I'll take some of those little salt packets, which are about 300 milligrams from different gas stations and whatnot. And I had a stash of those on me. So every once in a while I'd rip the top off of those, and then I'd put some on like, the peanut butter tortillas that, I packed for the North Rim. So I did a little bit of that. Some people might find this gross, but I find it absolutely delicious. I love hard-boiled eggs when I'm running. Yeah, we can talk about that later, but, putting a little bit of salt on some hard-boiled eggs, like while I was eating, was fantastic. I can get hate mail for this later too, but tuna while I'm running is fantastic. So that's another good salty source. Just a couple ideas for other people.
Those are interesting eating habits in a run. Now, I do love hard-boiled eggs when I go kayaking, and everybody always thinks that's weird when we're like out on a trip and I'm breaking out the hard-boiled eggs and tossing them across the lake or river to people. But
I love that.
I packed in a bunch of hot dogs because I wanted to have a hot dog at Phantom Ranch over the fire.
How'd that turn out?
It didn't, because there was a no burn order and there were no campfires allowed.
So did you eat cold hot dogs, or?
Had to go down cold.
Oh, God.
I know.
I think I'll take the eggs over the cold hot dogs.
The tuna, man, come on.
Oh.
Man, it's something that I like in like everyday, like average consumption, so I was like, it's got sodium, it's got protein. Here's how big of a nerd I am too, is like we always think, like get your carbohydrates, get your energy up like 200 to 400 calories or so, right? But a huge thing about being able to bounce back from big efforts too is you're going through an entire day where you're breaking down muscle tissue, you're expending calories, and then Like personally, if I put in a little bit of protein, just like I would any other day, it makes my recovery a heck of a lot better. So I'm like, what are some really great bang on, protein sources? Some eggs, some tuna. It'll get me some salt, right? It'll make me feel better in recovery. So that's my whole theory for that. So sometimes it's the taste that makes you do things, and sometimes it's the, oh, this might actually be pretty good for training later on down the road. So we'll toss this in there.
I
So here's
can't
your
agree more.
warning now. If you're running kettle and something stinks, it might be Coach Reese.
Yeah, sorry. Apologies now.
I can't agree more about the importance of real food out there. I mean, whatever it is that you like, that you think, is going to work for you, that you can bring along and stick in your pack that's relatively durable, shove it in the pack and bring it. You can't do this on gels and gummies. You really got to have some food, because you're going to be out there for how long? 12, 14, 16, 18 hours. That's a long day of constant exercise and real challenge. So bring food.
Something I've been training with now, but I didn't do at the Grand Canyon because I wasn't aware of it, but something that's not real food, but we were able to carry it better, is the Morton's, or I believe it's pronounced Morton's or Martin's, super high carb fuel. And it's a powder you put in your drink, but one packet has 340 calories and over 70 grams of carbs. And it's super easy on the stomach. And that's like what I've been exclusively training with on long runs. So if you can practice with something that you can put in your drink to where you can kind of have more room to pack real food too, is going to be really good as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Tim, what did you use? Did you use that Morton's?
I have.
It seemed like you tried it.
Morton,
okay.
Yeah. I really like their gels a ton as well. They're flavorless, and they're more like a Jell-O than they are kind of like the liquidy. They just fit better in my stomach. So I took a couple of 160 packets with me, and then a bunch of those gels, but I primarily stuck to like real food, right? So Pro bars are like 490 calories, and I ate a ton of those really early, and then kind of slowly progressed into like the end of peanut butter, and then cookies and like whatever else I could get towards the end. But
that's huge. And that's something that I found in my trip too, was I wanted to go in thinking I'm going to eat the most solid foods and the densest foods at the start, just because it's colder. So your body's not diverting a lot of blood to just cooling down itself. During the heat of the day, I was like, I want nothing solid. That's when I went for the gummies. That's what I went for the gels and just the liquid and hydration and whatnot. So maybe that's something to try out too, is just what are your hot weather foods and what are your cold weather foods? Because you're going to be experiencing both.
That's a good point. Yeah. So we're nearing in on a half hour. So I'm going to finish up with one final topic that kind of stems right off of this. And then we're going to go into episode 2. And so I think we've already been touching on a little, is that nutrition and hydration. Lindsay and Tim, I have you kind of signed up for these areas. Do you want to share a little bit about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll mention one product I've been using a lot of too for people that don't do salt pills very well. I don't do salt pills at all. I can't swallow a pill when I'm trying to move. But I use either the Salt Stick Chews, or something even better is called Element, LMNT. And it's something I train for Badwater, because it's like super concentrated of salt, but it's an electrolyte mix you can also put in water. So just have something that you're super comfortable with for salt and electrolyte intake. And if something doesn't work for you, try a different way. Like myself, can't do pills, try powder. So that's super important for food. Fruit snacks are great. You can stuff them in your bag. The thing I wanted most, even when I did Mount Whitney, was salt and vinegar chips. So if you have any room, put those in your bag. Those are fantastic. And then you can always do, like, I love to take M&Ms on these long journeys, but eat them before it gets hot, obviously. but I always have M&Ms. So like, if you want a snack for the way down, M&Ms are a great option, but be sure to remember to eat them before sunrise.
I've been using Milky Ways on my training runs, and I've been freezing them so they stay colder, so you can use them through your run.
That's a good idea too.
Yeah, because they're high in calorie, right? So 80 calories, a little tiny bar, and so that's a pretty big boost for me in an hour.
Right. I think also you could, I've done this a few times, like you could get away with putting like packs of peanut butter, or I'd use honey a lot. So like from Amazon, you can get a little, I think it's like an ounce packet of honey that's in a cardboard container, and you can rip off and just eat honey. It's a great source of calories too, that won't spoil in the heat. So whatever you can stomach out there. And the goal is, I think when you're packing your foods and your fluids, is space. So the chips are a luxury, items like that, but anything else, like pick your luxury item and then have like one luxury item and then pack around it with essentials.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The Payday is a great choice. Payday candy bars, because there's no chocolate in it. They don't melt.
Yeah.
They're sturdy and durable in your pack, and they're kind of salty. So those are a go-to of a lot of trail runners around here. Are the Paydays. So. But
The only thing I think I would add too is I took kind of a good healthy dose of like Gatorade Endurance, or if you have a favorite drinkable calories supplement, you can take that with you too. From the food standpoint, everything will be smashed by the time you get like down to the bottom of the canyon. So
yeah, for sure.
For that, and I kind of anticipated, like anything, I would probably start to steer away from wanting to eat. And so for me, I saved a lot of the things that I would be really excited to eat, like mangoes towards the end, or like some smashed watermelon. And that way I just got like, okay, great. I have this really rewarding thing that I'm going to get to once I get through the valley and through the box. And that helped me just to be like mentally thinking about this reward from food. But I also don't do candy either. Like that just doesn't sit well with me. It's just not something that I do in runs. And so I try to keep it as healthy as possible. And kind of your point, Reese, which is trying to think about like, what will my body do best with versus what will taste the best. And then kind of tiered that out over a certain amount of miles.
And I think, overall, just all the conversation that we're talking about, it's unique to each person, and you have to try it in training, because you don't want to try new things that day because it may not sit well with your stomach. So, and I think some people can't do fruit on runs because of the fructose. So, you have to be prepared for that. You don't want to just go in and take the ideas we're saying today may not work for you.
Yeah.
Hey, one other quick thought about water while we're on nutrition and hydration. Depending on what time of year you go, the water sources may be shut off in the canyon. So it's important to know, like in that Facebook group, you can find out what's available where so that you can plan, because from Phantom on up to the North Rim is a long hike, and you can filter out a Bright Angel, but there's some spots that are really not that safe to get into. So you just never know. I mean, there's some areas where it's really rushing and the walls of that creek are steep. So, you may just need to really kind of be careful and plan your hydration according to the time of year and what's available. So, just a thought about that.
All right. Thank you. All right. So this is going to conclude the first episode of our show on Rim to Rim to Rim. But stick with us, because we're going to go on to episode 2, and this is going to be kind of like a Freaky Friday. So we're going to just start all over with some introductions, because this is going to be a separate video. And in this segment, we're going to cover safety, planning your group, training highlights, the terrain, the wildlife, vegetation, the experience, and your social responsibility as a community. So we have a lot more left to go. So let's get started, and we're going to mix it up, and I'm going to have Tim. Can you introduce yourself just real quick?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Tim Ryan, coming to you live from Naperville, Illinois. I ran the Rim to Rim last year in April. Had a wonderful experience. Like I said in the last one, I have the pleasure and honor of being coached by Coach Loretta here. So she got me prepared and through the canyon. And then she did the post coaching afterwards to make sure that I recovered myself mentally and physically when I got out of there. I am representing all of the amateurs today that are out there and thinking about running the Rim to Rim. We've got a bunch of experts, and I've been taking notes from them as well on how to eat, how to drink, and how to get through the canyon for the next time that I do it.
And he survived, and it was over a year ago, and I'm still coaching him. So, and he's here today. So must be something good going on. All
There you
right,
go.
Reese.
Hi, my name is Reese. I just got back from the Grand Canyon just over a week ago. Had a phenomenal time. It was a wonderful and life-changing experience. You don't go in and come out of that canyon the same person. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about the people that you do it with, as well as you're going to learn how awesome our community is, because there's a lot of great people out on that trail that are going to share in the experience with you.
That's deep, and we're going to get into that even more in a few minutes. And Lindsay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lindsay Phoenix. I'm a coach with Ornery Mule, and I'm based out of Los Angeles. And I did Rim to Rim back in 2019. My only trip to the Grand Canyon, but I'm desperate to go back. So hopefully soon.
Yay. And Coach Scott.
Hey, everybody. Coach Scott Struck from Battle Creek, Michigan. I've been out to the canyon a few times, but have done Rim to Rim twice, once in 19 and once in 21, and just had a fantastic experience out there. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but also one of the most memorable, and one of the things that I would just love to go back and do again, because it's just so amazing out there.
Awesome. And that's saying a lot, because Coach Scott has done some 14ers. He's done some challenging things. So listen up, and you can learn from the experts here. So when you're planning your trip, you're going to have some information and that you can take with you. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll get those answered either during our show or afterwards. And know that we have some resources here. We do offer coaching consults as well as monthly coaching. So if you need some support with Rim to Rim, we're here to help you out as well. So we're going to start out this segment with safety. Reese, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Yeah. I think, first and foremost with safety, just know your body, know what you're capable of, and have trust in the training that you put in up to that point. I think your physical preparedness is going to be a lot of the battle. But other than that, a really great option that you can carry as far as safety equipment goes is going to be a spot tracker. We had one on our trip just as kind of like an emergency button should anything happen. And that also goes to say too, if you're going to be traveling with another group, it's definitely a good idea to have that safety talk with people. Me and my friend who I did it with, we sat down one night, I think it was like 2 or 3 nights before the Grand Canyon, and we just talked, hey, what does our safety look like? What does a bad day look like? What do we do in certain circumstances? What happens if you can't walk, if you can't get yourself out? Do we split up? Do we stay together? So really just kind of ironing out those details. So when you descend into the canyon, okay, we're physically prepared. We have our safety equipment, but we also know each other well enough to the point where if we encounter any circumstances, then we can know that we're making the right calls based off of what we already planned outside of the canyon under good emotional and mental circumstances. Because there's no bailout points. I mean, you go down into the canyon, you get to the river, there you are. You can't just hit a button and get picked up without a helicopter evacuation, which I hear is upwards of like tens of grand. So yeah, definitely don't plan on anybody coming in to get you without an expensive payday. We also talked too about not going for a dip in the Colorado River. Definitely take any sort of stream crossing carefully. As far as, there is the big Colorado River, definitely don't go swimming in it. Cross the bridge, please. But the other water creek crossings, there's probably a good 6 bridges that you go over. And there's a couple streams that you do cross. So, watch your footing, make sure that you're not going to roll an ankle or anything. As well as, a good portion of safety too is going to be in making sure that you have your equipment packed, and you double check everything to make sure that you have everything, your calories, your lighting, as well as any warmer clothes. You got to also go in thinking that, okay, if worst comes to worst and we have to spend another long night in the canyon, do we have the equipment to go through at least 5 to 6 hours of 20-degree weather? Because the canyon gets very hot in the day. Everybody knows that, but it's also striking how very cold it gets. It's winter conditions when the sun's not out, and it's Florida conditions when the sun is heating up the box, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that in the desert, compared to us being used to the Midwest and where we have so much humidity, and when you get in the desert and there's not that humidity, could be the same temperature, but the feel is way different.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'd like to add, just a couple quick things on safety, if I could. A little first aid kit would be really handy, something that you can use to address a blister real quick, maybe some ibuprofen, just some tape and bandages and stuff, just in case, because a lot of things can happen out there and there's no place for you to really get a lot of help. So, you kind of have to cover the minor emergencies that you might have out there. And then one other really important thing, there's about a gazillion Instagram spots out there for a perfect photo. However, you got to be so careful, because when we were there in 2021, we saw a helicopter flying in and out a couple of times, and we didn't know this, but it turned out that the day before we were there, a trail runner had stopped for a selfie over the edge, and she lost her footing and she went down and she died. And
Wow.
they were in to evacuate, to get her body out. So it is a dangerous place. And so you have to be super careful, because, everywhere you look is like a beautiful postcard that you just want to get a shot of, but you have to really respect the edges and the fact that there are no safety rails out there. There are no chains. There are no spots where there's barricades to keep you from getting too close to anything. You are out in the canyon, and it really requires you to be aware of your surroundings all the time. So be very careful out there.
Great. Thanks for that tip. That's super important for people to think about.
Yeah.
Coach Reese, could you share a little bit about Spot Tracker and how that works? I know a lot of people, I see it on posts like trying to use one, but don't really understand that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. And it's not my Spot Tracker. So to my understanding, what you do is you buy this GPS locator, and it will basically, you can turn it on and you can leave it on, and you can give people a URL so that way they can track your progress. Or you can just kind of leave it in your pack just the way that it is and just use it as kind of like an SOS button. But regardless, once you have the Spot Tracker, which I think is like a couple $100 or so, then you can pay a subscription monthly. So that way, anytime you hit that SOS button, that will send a GPS signal out, and then they'll contact the local authorities that need to be in charge of a search and a rescue type of mission. So realistically, once you have the device in your hand, it's such a good companion, just to know that if anything comes worse to worse, it doesn't require any cell phone signal, because you're not going to get any at the bottom of the canyon. But you still have that safety net of at least the thought of somebody coming to get you.
Right, great.
Yeah,
Tim, did you use a Spot Tracker? Is that what you used?
Yeah, I use the Spot Tracker, and now that I have it, it's a peace of mind for me. Anytime I'm in the wilderness or outside, I kind of always don't leave home without it now. And a couple of reasons too, which is like, I think when you tell people you're going to go run the Grand Canyon, lots of people get very worried about you. At least it did for me, right? So you can also, it has a functionality where you can push the button and it will drop a pin on kind of your exact location, and you can sign up to 15 emails to get that. So as you go throughout the day, you can keep updating your loved ones on kind of exactly where you're at and how fast you're moving. And they'll even be able to see like, oh, you're slowing down, and they'll know exactly kind of when you get out as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Scott, did you have something to share?
Yeah. Reese is absolutely correct that there's no cell signal in the canyon. But there is one weird little spot out there called the phone booth. And it's on the floor of the canyon. It's near Cottonwood. And there is a spot where if you search around, you can get a cell signal in this very small area. It somehow reflects off the walls of the canyon. And you see people there on their phones sending a quick text, but you really can't rely on that because it's hard to find. You almost have to be a local to know exactly where that is. It's just a little bitty spot where, you might have a little moment of signal. So but yeah, it's pretty remote. You know, the spot tracker
Nice.
works on, you know, satellite and GPS, so it's a much more reliable way to communicate out.
There you go. Aren't you glad you're with us tonight? A super secret spot in the bottom of the Grand
That
Canyon
was
called the
good
phone
stuff.
booth.
The
Yeah,
phone booth, yeah, the local call it the phone booth.
I'll
Right
add
on.
some. Oh, go ahead.
It's right on Bright Angel Trail, near Cottonwood.
Got it.
You see people with their phone, you know, doing this. They're in the phone booth, probably, you know, or close.
I'll add something quick on safety. I went with a group of, there were 4 of us total, but some of us stayed together. One person ran ahead. You kind of have to, we'll go into that like when you pick your group. But our guy that had gone ahead and was waiting for the 3 of us, he wore a very distinct cowboy hat and he had on pants. So like whenever we passed someone, we'd be like, hey, did you see a guy run up ahead? And they'd be like, oh, the guy in pants, because no one's out there in pants and or in the cowboy hat. And we're like, yes. So maybe like within your group, maybe somebody wears something kind of bright to where if one of you gets, you know, ahead or behind, you can kind of like, there's so many people out there, you can kind of like check in on each other. We found that super helpful because we're like, okay, where's Tom? Okay, he's up ahead. We've got that confirmed. He's doing good.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and move into planning your group? Lindsay, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you plan your group, for me, I wouldn't personally go with people I don't know. It takes a lot of trust out there with the people that you're with. I like I said, I went with a group of 4 of us, and I think you can do this differently. But for me, I picked a group of people that are ability-wise very similar, because it is a long day and you know you don't want to get frustrated, especially when you're friends with people, if someone's slower or if someone's faster, and then it becomes a safety issue as well if someone's lagging way behind and nobody, you know, everyone's tired and wants to get out of the sun. You don't want to leave them. You have to have your plan in place. So I think the best course of action is to pick a group of people where everyone's relatively around the same ability level. I know you want to experience it with a lot of different people, but you know, if you choose to go with someone who is a bit slower, or if you're the slower one and there's someone a bit faster, there's nothing worse than someone waiting on you. Like if you're struggling and then you're pushing yourself beyond your limits because you know someone's waiting on you as well, that's a safety issue. So really try and pick a group of people who, 1, you trust, and 2, you guys are all similarly in the same sort of fitness level. I think it was helpful for us.
Scott, you have something to add?
I went with a bunch of crazy knucklehead guys who run together a lot, and these guys all had their own particular call. Okay, and so the canyon is echoey, right? Yeah. So even though, you know, we were separated just a little bit, you should really stick together, but we ended up separated into a couple of groups, and so, you know, it is totally possible to like have call and response out there. You know, one guy is the crow, and so he does the caw caw. You know, I happen to be the mountain gorilla, so I do the woo 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 woo. And so it echoes like crazy, and you can communicate with each other, you know, back and forth every so often, just to let everybody know you're okay, you're there. You know, we're not too far apart. You know, and so we're good to go. Especially at night when you can't really see each other. You can see headlights all over the place, but you don't know exactly maybe where the other part of your running group is, but it is better to stick together if possible, for sure, for safety. You know, you should never be solo out there, for sure.
Good. I love the signals. I used to run a group race with a bunch of high school cross country kids, and we would do the same thing as we came through the woods, so we could figure out what position everyone was in. We'd make sounds.
Yeah, it's fun, and it echoes like crazy. It really travels.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's fun.
Okay, anybody else have anything to add on group or picking your group?
Oh yeah. No runners left behind. No runner left behind. And also no PRs on this day. You know, my take on it is, unless you're a local and you run this thing every weekend and you know it like the back of your hand, and you know you can compare your time, you know, trip after trip. I treat it as an adventure. Treat it as an experience. You know, don't diminish the amount of time that you're spending out there. Get every minute of it. Just absorb it all. Just enjoy it. You know, don't try to rush through it and end up, you know, sort of not appreciating it. So yeah, keep it slow, keep it steady, you know, stay in a group, Don't leave anybody behind. Just, really focus on safety. And like what Lindsay said, running with a group of similar ability level runners is a good idea.
Yeah.
Unless you're Coach Reese and you decide to steal the King of the Mountain with a little bit of a glitch in Strava. Do you want to share your story?
Okay, yeah. So when me and my buddy were going, he was getting worked on the day, and he was taking the type of like train kept a rolling type of mentality where he's like, you know what? I'm not going to be running that fast, but I'm going to keep up a good hiking clip, and I'm just going to knock some miles down. So I was like, man, I'm in the box of the canyon right now. Like, I would love to hike with you, but I'm absolutely getting fried. So I could feel the sunburn just hitting every portion of my skin that wasn't covered. So I told him, I was like, CJ, I am not going to leave you, but I may just be just out of sight in the next shade waiting up, So what I would do is I would shade hop. I would start in one piece of shade. I'd be with him. I'd hike through the shade with him. And then I was like, I'm going to spend 0 time out in the sun. So I would sprint to the next shade covering, and then I'd wait for him and we talk, and then I do it again. And supposedly on one of these sprints, I must have nabbed a course record from Walmsley through a
No
GPS.
way.
Because yeah. So because the GPS is constantly bouncing back and forth in the walls, it must have just shot right past it and got me the credit for it. So the second I uploaded the entire canyon run, which showed like 75 miles or something anyway, something way off in the GPS, I had to turn it to private and then take everything off because I was like, I don't want him getting this email of like, like some whoever from Wisconsin, got his course record in the canyon.
That's amazing.
Not just the course record, like beat his by like a minute or something.
Yeah, it said I ran like a 3:43 mile or something.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That was
Awesome.
I
great.
had to screenshot it before I turned it private just because it's funny, right?
I have a quick little tidbit. Funny. It's funny, but it's also safety too, I guess. So we exited out of Bright Angel, and there were the 4 of us. And once we were within like half a mile, but it was dark. So we all, like finished that last little bit solo, so whoever could get up the fastest. So my friend Josh is up ahead of me. He gets out, and my friend Mary Lou is behind me. Somehow at the very top of Bright Angel, there's a little divot to the left, and then there's the real path to the right. Somehow in the dark, I go left. So the joke is I've never finished rim to rim to rim because I didn't go up the right way. But that posed a problem because there's no cell reception, and I couldn't find my group. And so I'm yelling at the top of the canyon, Mary Lou, like I'm yelling everyone's name. So the funny part is I find a restaurant and I'm just eating French fries and I let them find me. So
Wait a second, what happens to no runner left behind?
Exactly. So the joke is I've never actually finished it because I didn't go up probably the Strava segment, but it all leads the right way. But maybe that last little bit finished together.
Oh, that's great. I love that story.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next topic is terrain, the wildlife, vegetation. Scott, do you want to take this?
Oh, yeah. It is amazing. The canyon is an incredible place of geologic diversity and animal and reptile diversity. And, it's incredible. I mean, you start in like pine forest at the rim. There's pine trees and the typical stuff that we see in the Midwest. But then as you descend into the canyon, you go into more of a desert atmosphere. There's cactuses and cracked earth and salamanders and lizards and all sorts of stuff. There are scorpions down there, rattlesnakes, 7 different kinds of rattlesnakes, lizards, Gila monsters, and just lots and lots of switchbacks, because you're descending, quite a ways down to the bottom. One of the things that I learned about when I was out there, though, is the agave. And, these are amazing plants. I didn't know about this the first time I went, and I learned about it and then really appreciated it the second time. But the agave, is this native plant that grows in a big stalk, like a gigantic asparagus. And it takes like 100 years for some of these varieties to mature. They also are known as the 100-year plant or the century plant. And when they mature, they then flower and bloom and drop their seeds, and then they die. And these plants have significance to the indigenous people there, because they are revered as, sort of, something that has a sacred, significance to it. A lot of them are on this planet longer than we are as humans. And so, these plants were treated as very sacred by, the indigenous people. And I certainly don't know, all of the ins and outs of that. But when you go in the canyon, you see those all over the place. And it really makes you think, wow, these plants have been here longer than I've been on this planet. And it gives you a sense of perspective and time. And when you look at all the layers and you see every shade of brown and every shade of gray and green and black and purple, it's incredible to be out there and see, this amazing landmark. It took, they say it took about 6 million years to carve the Grand Canyon. And here we are on this planet for only maybe 100 years. So it's an incredible place. It's very spiritual. I mean, you really, I think, can appreciate the significance of that canyon to the indigenous people that live there and that have, that has been their sacred sort of, home for all these centuries. So it's really interesting. The flowers are beautiful. There's little wildflowers all over the place. The cactuses are beautiful. I mean, it's just really, really incredible. And so it's a place that you should study up on a little bit so that you can appreciate that when you're zipping through there and, can recognize some of those things. So.
Nice. Thank you. What a beautiful description. Did anybody see any creatures while you were out there?
Before you go into the canyon, there's a bunch of elk. Like, I'm sure everyone saw the elk, which were just stunning. Like, they're not deer. They're like these massive, beautiful creatures. I'm not from the Midwest. I'm sure you guys have a lot of that, but it's kind of cool to see that when you're expecting desert. Like, there's just a bunch of elk like in the parking lot. So that's kind of cool.
There are deer down there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Probably tough to follow Scott on this because that was very well done and very descriptive. But
yeah,
the biodiversity is, I think, a super big highlight of this, right? So you leave and there's snow and it's freezing, and then you get into Indian Garden and it starts to turn into this tropical paradise. Mm-hmm. And then you hit the desert and then you kind of repeat that again on the back end. But on top of that, you're looking at the rock formations who these have been carved out over, thousands of years. And, every layer represents a different period of time. And you can clearly see that on the rocks. And, your brain, you got a lot of time to think out there. So you're just like, what would it be like during that time? But, for me, the river was the really magical part, right? You have this turquoise blue river and yeah. Coming there, getting there at sunrise and watching the sun rise around the canyon and hit the turquoise blue, that will be a forever unforgettable experience and like connection with nature. I have that on my backdrop of my iPad, and every time I look at it, I get this feeling like, oh my gosh, that day was so special for me, and that experience was so special for me. But everybody kind of has their thing, whether that's the agave plant. My friend says that's a spirit animal. He's a big guy, right? For me, it was the river, and for everybody, it's something different. What other animals did we see? We saw scorpions definitely on the way home, right? If you have your headlamp on, and I was probably coming in a little bit later than these folks were. But on the stairs, we saw lots of bats. In fact, laughed at because I was like a bat magnet that night. I don't know what was happening, but they were everywhere. So those were some of the less cool creatures that we got to see, but there are deer, there are elk, there are lizards. There's tons to see down there. And unless you actually go over the edge, you don't really know what you're going to experience.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I do really like the appreciation, and the sentiment for the reverence that everybody has for the canyon, whether if we've been there once or twice. It is kind of this place where you can only describe it so well, and you can only try to pass along the gravitas that is everything the canyon has to offer. But until you do go down there and you experience the sights underneath, and a good undertone of the physical duress that it takes to actually get to those beautiful and wild places. The feeling is somewhat lackluster unless you've actually gone through those physical trials to see those wonderful things yourself. So, you know, it's amazing listening to everybody talk and being able to feel that again myself is kind of, you know, it feels great. And it's something that, you know, like I'm going to carry for the rest of my life for sure. So I think, you know, with the terrain of the canyon, just the gravitas and the emotional weight the canyon has for so many people, you can really feel it as you gaze and look around the surroundings, that this place means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but you know that everybody who's been in there doesn't take it lightly.
Yes, and it has to be protected and preserved. Absolutely. Reese, you know, I should mention this, that in the canyon, there are, and you've probably noticed these, there are these flat topped towers that kind of come down, and the top is really flat. And they're all over the place. And those are known as temples. That geologic formation is known as a temple. And I didn't know this at the time I was out there. But when you look at the map, there's the Brahma temple, this temple, that temple. And I think that has some significance, because those really are sort of places that you can stop and worship whatever being it is that you believe in. I mean, it is a very deeply spiritual and moving place. So just to add to what's already been said, but the first time I was out in the canyon, you know, you start in the middle of the night, you know, at 4 a.m., and you're just using your headlamps. And like Reese said, you see the wall on one side, and you see the pitch black abyss on the other side. And in our group, as the sun came up over the rim of the canyon, it began to light the canyon up and start to show us where we were. You can't see the rim anymore because you're far down into the canyon. You can't see the river yet because you still have a ways to go. For about the first half hour after sunrise, all that anybody could say in our group was, wow, wow, wow. Everywhere you look is like a postcard. And it's like, you are in it. You are in the canyon. You're a part of it at that point. You know, you are on this journey, and you realize all of a sudden how big it is. And it's just so cool. I mean, it's just such a great, great place to be, to experience. Oh my goodness.
Oh, this is amazing. So we need to wrap up here shortly, but we have a few more topics that we want to cover, and we're just going to go through those, and then we're going to wrap up our show. So I'm going to turn it over to Reese. If you could just give us a few training highlights that would help get you through R to R to R.
Yeah, absolutely. Hike a lot. You're going to be hiking a ton. You know, like I think a lot of people go into the day thinking, you know, I'm going to run the flats, I'm going to run the descents, but then on the uphill, you can lose a lot of time by having an inefficient hike. So personally, what I did, you know, was I took a treadmill and I put it on, you know, anywhere from 13 to 15% grade. And I got up to a speed where it wasn't unmanageable, but it made me mentally engage with how my body was moving and what I was doing. Kind of pushed that hiking speed just a little bit. And that helped tremendously, as well as just having good general fitness going in, making sure that you're in, you know, 50-mile shape. Like we talked about before too, this isn't really a day for PRs. So you want to at least be very confident that given a typical day, you're going to be able to finish the distance as well as the elevation gain. With elevation gain comes elevation descent too. So with all that uphill hiking, you do want to make sure that you are conditioning your bodies for that eccentric load that they're going to experience. You start going downhill, and you know, a lot of people, if they don't run a lot of hills, you start the day already really mashing up your quads. You know, so good things to think about would be some strength training, doing some eccentric work, like really taking your squats nice and low and slow on the way down, just to get those muscles used to lengthening under tension. But as well as, you know, just a good general strength training protocol to help you handle those really big steps, because there's at least a couple hundred of them that are going to rise about, you know, what we would consider a 2 to 3 stair height in and of itself. So making sure your step up game is dynamite is fantastic. So those are the main training points I could think of.
I'm
Okay,
a big
thank you.
believer. If I was going to go out again, I think what I would do to train, I'm a big believer in trying to simulate the course or the challenge as much as possible in training. I think I would spend probably a couple of hours on the Stairmaster. And I think what I would do is probably, you know, just a pretty good steady pace on the Stairmaster, not like running up them, but just, you know, steady and moving and sort of my power hiking style. And every so often, probably double up and skip a step. You know how you can like skip a step and go up even higher, you know, you go every other one, because there's a lot of step ups that are that high out there. So I think that for me would be a really good way to sort of get trained and, you know, get ready for that, because there's a lot of climbing. You're right, Reese, a lot of steps.
You know, and I feel like too, a good efficient hike can take your day, you know, from 17 hours to 14 hours. And, you know, if you can do that, then you're going to finish with a little bit of light left and actually see a little bit of the sun descending on the canyon itself. So if you can do that, like, I would highly recommend it. You know, I was talking with CJ, who I did the endeavor with, and I told him, I was like, you know, for how long that we finished, if we could hike for 1 mile an hour faster for 4 hours out of the 17 that we were out there, we would have made it back for the sunset. And when you think about it, 1 mile an hour for 4 out of the 17 hours that we were out there, it sounds like, oh man, we could have totally did that, you know, but then when you're in the heat of the day and the heat of the moment, you don't want to go any faster. So yeah, just thinking about distances that way, you know, especially when they're so long too, you can really make up a good chunk of time, have a better experience with a good efficient power hike.
That's an excellent point, Reese. Excellent point. It depends what you want. What do you want? You know, do you want to get there for the sunrise and the sunset? Do you want to spend every minute possible at Phantom? Do you want to, you know, what are your goals out there? You know, do you mind hiking at night? Some people might not mind. But
Loretta, if I could, maybe a training tip from the amateur, right?
Yes, definitely.
You know, all of these physical traits are awesome. And to be honest with you, Reese, like as the amateur, 1 mile per hour for 4 hours. If you would have asked me a 3 mile bathroom, I would have said, sounds terrible, right? Sounds actually nearly impossible. There is for someone,
your way out.
This was my first marathon. This was my first ultra running across, and there is a mental component, which is like I did climb Mount Lemmon, you know, in Tucson before I did this, and that was just a really big confidence booster for me to know that I could go that 20 plus miles. So I guess what I'm getting at is the mental training here, or the fact that you've got some grit, or that you know you've put yourself in a super strenuous mental position before, because you will have a moment that is not great, right? And you might even have a couple of moments that are not great. So knowing that you've got the mental fortitude to get through the canyon is really important, because you can't get out of it.
Excellent point. Really excellent point. I put an exclamation point on that one. I ran with a guy who is much stronger than me, much stronger. But on the hike up and out, I would see him at the corner of every switchback, and I could hear him. He was in his head. He was saying stuff like, I should have never done this. I can't do it. I'm not good enough for this. I can't handle it. What was I thinking? I'm like, dude, here's a Swedish fish. Chew that thing up and come on, let's go. And we get to the next switchback, and he'd be in the same spot mentally. His mental game was just shot, you know, after probably 13, 14 hours. He was tired. He was drained. He was just out of gas mentally. And he's a really strong runner. So, I mean, that mental edge is super, super critical. Yeah. And there's no way out. Got to go forward.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point that you brought up, Tim, because that's a huge part of training for ultra overall, is that mental part, right? We can get through it. We can be as fit as possible, but if you're not strong mentally, you're going to struggle. And just like running 100 miles, you have highs, you have lows, the same as, you know, doing rim to rim to rim. So I think it's really important that you think about it, you're planning for it mentally. We do have a video that Coach Scott and I and one of my athletes, Isla, did on visualization. So if you haven't got that, that's on our YouTube channel. And I think that would be another tool that could be used in a
Sure,
situation like
absolutely.
this.
Yeah. What you said is true, Loretta. This experience, it's transformative. Reese alluded to that a little bit. It changes you. It changes who you are as a runner, as an ultra runner. And it's like a whole lifetime in a day. You start in the dark, you emerge into the light, you run through the day, you run into the evening, the shadows, the twilight. You meet people along the way. You make great friends. You have a great conversation. You say goodbye to them. You meet some new people. You have all these new relationships. You see everything possible out there. Just this amazing planet we live on. It's all there for you to experience. You have the highs, the lows. It's all there. It's a whole lifetime condensed into one day, and it changes you. It really does. It changes who you are.
Nice. Tim, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the overall experience for me was changing. It was a confidence builder, right? It was an outdoor wilderness experience for me. It was a friendship builder for me and my buddy that ran it together. I think the list goes on and on of all of the things that it was for me. That said, I think that goes with an asterisk of just making sure you're prepared, because it could probably be a really bad experience for a lot of people. And I think the National Park Service would probably tell you they pull people out of there all the time that aren't mentally and physically ready to do this. So really thinking through your plan, thinking about what you want to experience out of it, how fast do you want to go? Who do you want to go with? All of the things that we've covered over the last hour or so are really important. This isn't like you show up to your local park on the weekend and you run a couple of miles and you high five. This is months worth of planning and preparation and excitement. And then at the end, you get this experience that, if you can't tell, all of us are super passionate to talk about. And we're all super jealous of Reese because he got to go recently. And we're all probably thinking, when can we go back and do this again?
Yeah, for sure. The group of people that I went with, really, really, really good runners, really strong, really tough people. And there was about 10 of us. And when we finished, I asked everybody, I was really curious. I said, of all the hard things that you've done in life, how would you rate this? Almost everybody said, oh, it's definitely 1 or 2, 1 or 2, like the hardest thing or second hardest thing. And one girl said, oh, this was probably a 5. I'm like, holy cow, what have you been through in life? Most people see this as like really a challenge, really hard. And these are, hardcore ultra runners who, have the miles and stuff and have the training and the experience. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's not something to be taken lightly, and, isn't something that you can just wing it. You've really got to train for this and really prepare and go with a group and make it an adventure. Yeah, for sure.
So we have learned so much tonight, and I hope that this has helped you take away something, at least, that you can use if you decide to go on a rim to rim adventure. And again, like I said, if you want to reach out to us and do a consult with our coaches to get some more information, just let me know. But I'm going to let Reese wrap it up with talking a little bit about our social responsibility out on the trails.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just like we were all talking about, you're going to meet so many people who, you might have known them for 5 seconds, but they got your back. I met a lot of people out there who, were offering anything from water to extra food. And it's like, no, I'm all good. Thank you very much, though, appreciate it. So I think a huge part of the social responsibility is, pack for yourself and make sure that you are situated with your calories and your water and your nutrition, but in the back of your head, also carry a little bit extra for your neighbor that you don't know you're going to pass, just in case somebody else is having a rough day. Leave no trace principles for sure also apply to any great adventure in the backcountry. Pack out what you take in, like try not to leave anything on the side of the trail. We all want to leave this wonderful backcountry that we have to play with, like nice and pristine and wild for the next person too. So, leave only footprints and take only pictures. But otherwise, yeah, going in with a healthy amount of respect for the environment that you're in, for the people that came before you to build the trail, to build the bridges that you're going to cross, as well as to kind of establish this route, you know, kind of sets the intention of the journey of, okay, like I'm coming in here and I'm going to explore the land, and I'm going to leave it the way that I found it. So that way other people can have the same experiences, of the utmost importance, in my opinion.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach Reese. I don't think anybody could end this any better than that. That was amazing. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and Coach Lindsay and Coach Scott and Coach Reese and Tim for all sharing your stories. It's been really fun getting to learn a little bit more about it and learning some more information about doing the trek. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Loretta.
Have a great
Thanks, guys.
night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.